Hey guys, before we start this video, a huge shout out to Mr. Mills45, the author of this series. It is highly recommended that you have read or listened to all 10 episodes of I'm a Superhuman tasked with protecting humanity before listening to this story for better understanding. This is a prequel to said series, taking place 12 years before its events. May 24th, 2014. 12 years before the Procton's arrival. There I was, levitating 40 yards above the ground as the beast rose out of it. The dirt and rock deforming around its mass as it began to tower over the surrounding environment. The creature exceeded 100 feet in height, and its skin, which tightly wrapped around its body, was a dark, Tyrian purple. The beast stood on two short but thick appendages, and had a tail that was about half the length of its actual body, with that same purple pigmentation. Two long appendages sat at its side, and at the end of them were 4-fingered claws. Each fingernail was about the length of a typical sedan. Its face consisted of 2 large slits on either side that glowed a bright lime green. A slight snout protruded from between them, holding its teeth that were the size of freight truck tires, as well as a large black nose with nostrils that were like 2 mini black holes. The thing possessed no visible ears and looked like some odd cross between a lizard and a rat. I flew up to the beast, hovering at eye level with it. Okay, so do you think it's possible for us to talk this out? Or are you just gonna try and eat the city? I asked, pointing over toward the Manhattan skyline just over a mile away from us. I enjoy human sustenance far too much, you fool, the beast bellowed, nearly drenching me in a glop of its saliva before I quickly flew to the side out of the way. Well, you're not gonna be eating my people, so you need to find a different food source, I replied. So be it, the creature erupted, before unexpectedly wrapping its tail around me with surprising speed, far beyond what I imagined something of this size being capable of. I put my arms out and struggled to free myself of its grasp. The creature cackled as it tightened its grip around my waist, attempting to choke the life out of me. So instead, I tried a different method and simply threw my momentum forward and flew straight at the creature. A sonic boom erupted and coincided with me striking him right in the snout with a blow hard enough to send both of us crashing through a patch of trees. We both stumbled, and I flopped around a bit while still sliding along the terrain, tearing up dirt and rocks in my path before regaining control of my momentum. But the kaiju did as well. He lost his grip on me in the process, and I crashed through a boulder after falling out of his tail's hold. I got up and flew at him again, at this time striking him with a hard left hook, enough to make him stumble and nearly fall over. I then circled around and followed up with a second blow on the right side of his snout, before finishing the combo with a flying uppercut to his bottom jaw, knocking one of his massive teeth out of his mouth. It flipped and spiraled upward before falling back down and embedding into a tree below us. Still want to eat the city? I asked with vigor, hovering in the air 10 feet from its face with my arms crossed as I awaited his response. Instead of responding, the beast just simply lunged forward and threw out a claw, as if he was going to grab me. But this was just a fake out, and I was suddenly smacked on my right side with his tail with enough force to send me sailing a quarter mile, only stopping when I crashed into the cliffside and my body was buried several feet into the rock. Once the dust settled, I wiped my mouth and saw a small streak of blood across the back of my hand. Alright, lesson learned. Just shut the hell up and fight, I whispered to myself with a sigh. I figured my best plan of attack was to get the creature off the ground where it couldn't use any leverage against me. So I pushed myself off the rock and flew directly back toward the thing with my fist pulled back and an erupting sonic boom blasting out behind me as I curved my flight path and went upward, preparing an uppercut. I struck the creature hard enough in the bottom jaw to send him several stories into the air, clearly caught off guard. The beast flailed and roared desperately, but I didn't allow him much time to ponder on his next move. I ascended from below, striking him again and increasing his altitude by another 1,000 feet. I increased my own as well, this time grabbing the end of his tail and swinging it in a short loop, disorienting it and gaining enough speed to throw him another quarter mile up into the air. when I erupted up to him from below and struck him with another blow hard enough to send him into low cloud level. I flew up after him and held my hands over my head, catching him before he could start descending. He roared and squirmed, but the angle and position he was in above my head was far too awkward for him to move in any significant way that wouldn't result in him plummeting back down to earth, a fall that he would likely not survive without gruesome injuries based on the muscle density reports the DSI had on their files. Alright, now are you going to agree to find another food source, or are we going to keep going back and forth? I asked in a yell, much to the creature's dismay. This is absurd. You cannot demand me to change such a thing. You humans are all the same and have been for centuries. He roared in response above me as I held him up. Not until you promise not to go around devouring the city like you're at a buffet. I don't even know what that is, he bellowed. Do you truly expect me to give in to this ludicrous demand? Kinda, unless you want me to bring you up another few thousand feet or so, I replied with a half smile. Fine, fine, he screeched. I will return to feasting on plants and shrubbery. Now, I demand you bring me back to the ground at once. I continued to hover in place, not yet satisfied with his answer. Do I have your word? Yes, now bring me back down this instant. Absolutely, I replied, a smirk crept onto my face. Whatever. The beast snarled with dissatisfaction, his tone being one of bitter compliance. After returning the beast back to the ground, I flew back into downtown Manhattan, looking for any events that may have needed my attention. Super hearing was great in this regard, as it allowed me to pinpoint cries of distress or agony. I couldn't hear across the whole world or anything, but it was potent enough for me to track down things within my general radius for about a mile or so, depending on the decibel level of the sound. As I soared through the air for about half an hour, weaving between buildings and diving under highway passes, I came to the conclusion that nothing too immediate was going on that police and emergency services couldn't handle. A somewhat common occurrence, especially during this time of the year. Middle of summer when things really ramped up. What did catch my attention, however, was the sound of two men arguing as I soared between a couple of corporate-owned skyscrapers before making a hard right through an alleyway and narrowly avoiding accidentally flying into an apartment complex. I always told myself that I had become proficient in my flying ability over these last few years, but I've had a few slip-ups here and there, more than I like to admit. I pinpointed the arguing to be coming from a construction site some less than a quarter mile up ahead. I picked up speed and crossed the distance in a few seconds, ensuring to avoid a sonic boom in the middle of the day in such a dense area. When I arrived, I discovered it to be coming from a construction site. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, just machines, a couple mounds of dirt, and several large steel beams laying on the ground next to the unfinished structure that was supposedly being worked on. I slowly descended to the ground as the two frustrated men in hard hats continued to bicker while I stood off to the side, both of them not noticing my presence. My landing was rather soft. It's an 800-pound beam. No way we're moving that until the crane gets here, came the older, more weathered worker, likely the boss. His shirt and pants stained with dirt, dust and all sorts of other battle scars one would obtain from such work. His hard hat was so discolored, it was more brown than yellow. Hard work requires sacrifice. This crane is gonna take too long, and we're already behind on plan like you said. We need to find something else. The younger worker retorted. Like what? We gather up all the guys and heave-ho it? OSHA will be all over our asses. Last thing I need is another fine. I smiled, taking a couple of steps towards the men. Morning, gentlemen. Hope I'm not interrupting. Was just flying by and heard you might need a hand. Both of them swung around, eyes wide with surprise. Who the hell are you? Grilled the foreman. That's that Rumble guy that took down the sea monster a couple months back. Was all over the news, the younger one exclaimed, correcting him. Well, I'm grateful for what you did for us, son. But I gotta ask what you're doing on my construction site. Hell, aren't you technically a cop? Do you have a warrant of some kind to be here? He asked, his hands now hanging at his sides. I chuckled. I don't, but if you need me gone, just say the word. Both men then shared a glance. Each appeared somewhat skeptical, particularly the boss. A few seconds passed before I received any sort of response. Look, I already got the safety director watching me like a hawk for a previous slip-up, and the last thing I need is to be seen letting someone who's not on my payroll carry a huge load up to the top of an unfinished building. Because if you get hurt, it'll be my ass. I appreciate the offer though, Mr. Victor, or Rubble, whatever you prefer, sir. Victor, right. Thank you. And I understand, by the way. I followed up, giving both men a glance and a nod. I'll be on my way then. Never caught your names though. Jerry, came the foreman. Garrett, replied the younger worker. It was nice meeting you both, I went on. Hope the rest of the day is a little less stressful for you guys. Before I could turn and take off, the younger man took off his hard hat to scratch his head before sighing. Oh, come on, let him help out. What's the harm? He's freaking bulletproof. Ain't nothing gonna hurt him. Jerry then sighed, rubbing his own forehead as well before expressing defeat. Fine, alright. But at least wear a hard hat and make me look a little better, yeah? You got it. I nodded, walking up and holding out my hand for him to shake it. I got to work with the rest of the crew shortly after. The large steel beam they had mentioned earlier was the first thing I went for. I walked over, hoisted it up over my shoulder, and ascended a few feet above the ground, before stopping to hover as I asked, "Where did you want this again?" Jerry turned, a hesitant grin emerging on his face. "Just lay it down at the very top floor. Thanks." And I did just that, and spent the next half an hour or so helping them with whatever I could, moving around chunks of concrete, rebar, and/or stacks of beams. I actually got along great with the crew too. One member of it had told me all about how he planned to go home and take his son bowling for his birthday. Another informed me of an upcoming vacation he was anticipating, one that he planned to bring his family along with him for. Jerry's mood had also improved over the course of this, something that I was genuinely pleased to see. But unfortunately, the time did come to an end after I received a phone call from my director, Michael Dorith, or Mike as he preferred. "Hello?" I answered. "Where the hell are you? You were supposed to be back here 20 minutes ago." Mike fired back. Frustration was an understatement for how he sounded. "I got caught up with something," I retorted. "No, you need to drop what you're doing, now. Did you forget we have the First Lady on her way? Half the reason she's coming is to meet you." "She serves the taxpayers. So do I. I'm sure she's not gonna be upset if I'm late because, busy serving." "Knock off the smartass remarks and just get over here," Mike huffed, before then ending the call. "Yikes, even I could hear that," came one of the construction crew, his face sympathetic as he clutched the hammer in his left hand. "Guess I gotta head out. Sorry guys," I said, securing my cell phone back into my suit's sealable side pocket. "Don't be sorry. You do what you gotta do," Jerry added, now standing next to his crew member. I gave them both a smile before slowly lifting off the ground, now hovering a few yards in the air and preparing to take off. But Jerry called out to me, "Thanks, by the way." I looked down, nodding at him before giving my reply. "Don't mention it. Hope the rest of the day goes your way." With that, I had then taken off into the sky, bursting up into the air and above the roof of two surrounding buildings like a bullet being ejected from a gun barrel. The sonic boom came not long after I was several stories above said buildings. I then took off in the direction of the DSI headquarters, DSI standing for the Department of Superhuman Investigation, located about 30 miles west of where I currently was. The physical facility itself was relatively secluded and had no other significant infrastructure other than what was necessary within a couple miles radius. The roads leading to it were also under secure watch to avoid any civilians stumbling upon it, mostly for their safety. Speaking of roads, while I had been on my way to the facility, I heard the sudden blaring of several police sirens ring out from below me. This by itself wasn't much to glance at. There was always something going on in the city, but when I looked down and saw not only 4 squad cars, but multiple SWAT vans all driving in a convoy-like line, I raised a brow. This was shortly followed up with an explosion that rang out from some distance away. I turned my head to pinpoint the origin and saw a cloud of dark smoke rising from the Williamsburg suspension bridge as well as 2 militarized helicopters heading toward it. It wasn't even a thought in my head as to whether or not I should go check it out. If my director was gonna be pissed, then so be it. I'm sure the First Lady would be more understanding. I then took off in the direction of the bridge, another sonic boom immediately erupting as I thrust it forward, now flying faster than any missile on Earth, tearing through the air as I held my arms out in front of me. I maintained a higher altitude to avoid any negative effects from those below. Once I ended up reaching the bridge, I stopped hovering 100 feet or so above while taking in all the chaos that had been going on. Gunfire from police and SWAT officers where the smoke cloud was originating, hiding whoever or whatever it was they were shooting at. A car swerving and crashing into the safety beams on the side of the bridge. They bent but held. Then, without warning, a minivan had come flying out of the smoke at a speed so great it threw the SWAT officers, whose heads it had missed by mere inches, onto their backs from the sheer force of the wind it generated. Inside was what looked to be a mother and her teenage son, and it was headed straight for a large support beam. Without thinking, I took off after it, flying down, closing the couple 100 feet of distance and grabbing onto the back of the car. I then continued to fly with it in my grasp and slowly killed its momentum, flying for another several yards so that it would decelerate at a speed that was safe for the mother and son inside. Had I grabbed it and not moved at all, they likely would have been thrown forward and either been ejected through the windshield or slammed their heads so hard on the steering wheel and dashboard that their skulls would have cracked open. Gunfire and shouting continued to ring out in the background while I slowly descended and put the minivan back down on the entrance to the bridge. The mother and son's panicked screams came to a halt once they saw me, and the mother managed to stop shaking enough to roll down her window. Thank you so much. I thought we were gonna die," she exclaimed, her son exhaling heavy breaths in the passenger seat before stumbling on his words. You're rubble," he stuttered, his breath heavy and heartbeat through the roof. "Don't mention it, but you need to get as far away from here as possible. Go," I said with vigor, which was all they needed to put the car back in drive and speed off the bridge back onto the exit road. I then turned my sights back onto where the smoke cloud had previously been, now mostly cleared up as the SWAT and military troops continued to fire at whatever it was inside of it. I squinted my eyes, spotting a tall, lanky humanoid figure waving his hand around, as several vehicles surrounding him were suddenly lifted into the air and thrown about in various directions at breakneck speeds. I took off and flew over as fast as I could without causing further damage to the bridge or remaining people on it. Multiple of the projectile vehicles were headed straight for some officers and troops. I grabbed one that was just feet from crushing a squad of them, only for a pickup truck to fall on an officer on my right, crushing him instantly and cutting his scream short. The only thing that hadn't been smashed to viscera was his hand, which protruded from underneath the truck as a pool of blood seeped out on either side, while his fingers twitched slightly. Before he or she could do anything further, I set down the car in hand, flew into the now dissipated smoke cloud's origin, and grabbed the lanky figure who was responsible by the throat, careful not to apply too much force. "It's over," I snarled, narrowing my eyes to get a better look at who it was in my grasp. When we made eye contact, my jaw hung ajar as I was faced with what looked to be a young man, no older than 16 or 17. His expression was one of nothing but pure, unfiltered rage. He showed his teeth at me like a territorial bear issuing a warning. His dark hair was long and unkempt, his clothes tattered and torn in several spots along with various stains spread amongst them. I loosened my grip a bit more, still continuing to hold him as we hovered several yards above the road on the bridge. The officers and troops had ceased their fire for the time being. Regardless of the fact that he was a kid, there were still people who were both dead and hurt because of his actions, and I planned to make sure he didn't hurt anyone else. "Let me go," he snapped back. I heard the brief humming of metallic movement before a sudden and violent force had yanked me downward, causing both it and myself to crash through the bottom of the bridge, through asphalt, iron, and steel. Something dense was wrapped around my legs for mere milliseconds before I was thrown downward with enough force to hit the river below, and kept going a dozen feet below its surface before regaining control of my momentum. After doing so, I flew up, erupting from below the surface like a rogue torpedo and flying back up toward the bridge. I expected to see a second attacker of some sort, one that I anticipated to be powerful. Instead, I laid eyes on a far different sight. The kid, who was now just 10 feet below the hole that was in the bottom of the bridge that I had formed from crashing through, was standing on 2 separate beams of iron that acted as makeshift platforms to support him. They protruded from the bottom of the bridge, bent and contorted in a way iron beams just shouldn't. They also seemed to be far longer in length than they were before. It was now more obvious than ever that this kid's power was some sort of advanced telekinesis. Not only could he move objects with his mind, but he seemed to also be able to manipulate their core properties and dimensions to some small degree as well. Hence, as to how the length of the iron beams he was standing on were magically increased as well as the way they were shaped and contorted. It was likely he had used his powers to wrap 2 iron beams around his legs to pull me underneath the bridge in the first place. Instead of continuing to fly up, I hovered mid-air, water dripping down from my hair onto my suit. Not that it mattered. There was about 100 feet of distance between the kid and I. De-escalation was my best bet. A real fight between the two of us could absolutely annihilate this bridge and all the civilians who were still on it. Listen, kid, I'm gonna say this once and once only. You need to stop this before anyone else gets hurt or killed, I said, narrowing my eyes. Not until I get what I need, he shouted forcefully in response before 2 more iron beams suddenly detached from the bottom of the bridge and began to barrel towards me. They moved fast, like giant 20-foot bullets almost. Yet, I was still fast enough to evade them by flying upward and suddenly curving to the right. The beams followed, hitting straight for my center of mass as I suddenly stopped to hover and turned my body to face them. Once they were within striking distance, I grabbed the first beam and crushed it flat in my hand as I applied force with a vice grip. The second beam followed soon after, which I simply backhanded away with my opposite hand, sending it spiraling like a football parallel to the bridge before it ended up crashing into the river below. But the kid wasn't done yet. Before my attention was turned back to him, I heard an intense whooshing sound that could only be produced by something large moving fast. I turned, seeing a cement mixer truck headed toward me like a baseball at a batter. Inside was a terrified man wearing a safety vest, screaming at the top of his lungs in utter horror at the sight before him. I dropped the iron beam that was still in my hand and immediately flew backwards, creating some further distance between the truck and I to let it lose its speed on its own. After that, I blasted off and flew behind it, circling around and catching it by the back, similarly to what I did with the minivan. I then continued flying forward a bit, again letting it lose more of its speed before I stopped it completely. With it now in hand, I flew up and over the top of the bridge and set the truck down on the cracked asphalt before leaping over in front of the windshield to ensure that the driver was okay. Upon peeking in, I saw that he was slumped over on his steering wheel, but hearing his heartbeat confirmed that he had merely gone unconscious due to the intense shock of the situation. I had to get the area safe enough for paramedics to hit in and assist him and all the other injured people. Just as I thought I'd go and confront the kid once more and finally put a stop to all this, I heard a sound that made my stomach drop. It came from above, and I looked up, seeing the top half of one of the bridge's support towers beginning to lean forward as the cables attached had snapped off, likely by the kid's telekinesis. The tower groaned with a metallic hum as it continued to tip forward, a couple thousand tons of steel threatening to come down and collapse this section of the bridge. Shit, I cursed. I immediately took flight and dashed up to the middle of the support tower, putting both my hands in front of me and grabbing on. The tower groaned once more before being stopped in place, and I hovered there, almost 200 feet above the road of the bridge with this giant hunk of welded steel in my hands. Once I was confident enough that it was fully stabilized, I then flew forward slightly, pushing the tower back into place and not taking my hands off until I knew for sure it could stand. Repairs would still need to be made. After all, I wasn't a carpenter. But as long as it was stable for the time being, that's all that mattered. Luckily, some more heroes had showed up to help contain the situation. Cryo-Freeze, a man who was able to summon and disperse ice at will, as well as create constructs and weapons out of it. He slid down onto the bridge on an ice slide of his own making, riding it standing up like a surfer on a surfboard. Then there was Vora, a young woman who possessed the ability to enter into some sort of pocket dimension at will through any solid objects. So essentially, she could do things like jump into a floor and reappear through the ceiling at any time she wanted, and could bring other things and objects with her. Not many people know what the actual pocket dimension that she enters looks like. I had never been in it myself. She suddenly emerged through the ground, jumping out and landing next to me, just as Cryofreeze had jumped off his ice slide and landed onto the asphalt. Then there was the Constrictor, or just Linda as she typically preferred, a woman who was able to summon and manipulate magic chains. They seemingly could emerge from any surface and were completely under the control of her willpower. They were seemingly denser than tungsten, yet had the ability to move, curve, and bend with the fluidity of liquid. Speaking of which, she had landed down next to me on the bridge after manifesting a long chain out of one of the support towers. It shot out like a bullet before wrapping around and slowly carrying her down to safety, quickly uncoiling from her waist as she turned and looked at me with a smile on her face. "Hey Victor, Mike called us in. Good to work with you again," she exclaimed, her tone bubbling with excitement as gunfire continued to ring out across the bridge. "Good to see you again, Linda," I replied. "Got here not too long ago myself. The kid has telekinesis, and he's pissed. He's already killed an officer, and there's injured people all over this bridge. We need to stop him and get them to safety." "Oh no," she erupted. "What do you need us to do?" "Focus on crowd control and any wounded. Get everyone off this bridge as quickly as possible. I'll toy with the kid and keep him focused on me until you guys have it completely cleared." "Sounds like as good a plan as any. Hey squad," Linda shouted, turning over to Cryofreeze and Vora and relaying my instructions to the both of them. The three of them immediately leapt into action, with Cryofreeze announcing for everyone to back up before shooting out a stream of ice and allowing it to land 100 yards in front of us, creating a 12-foot-high wall between the battle going on between the kit, police, and armed forces and the majority of civilians who were on our side of the bridge, preventing any gunfire or debris projectiles from hitting them. After this, Vora then leapt downward onto the asphalt in a diver motion, disappearing into said asphalt and then re-emerging through the exterior of a car that had a woman leaned against it, blood dripping down her shoulder. "I'm here to help. Just come with me, okay?" she said, comforting the wounded woman who appeared grateful for help, slowly turning her head up to peer at Vora. Vora then grabbed the woman and the both of them sank through the floor together, vanishing into her pocket dimension. Vora likely intending to re-emerge in the nearest hospital and then come back and rinse and repeat the process. Then Linda activated her powers next. Several chains suddenly manifested and shot out of the asphalt below, grabbing several civilian vehicles and carrying them to the bridge exit ramp so they could drive away, this including the cement truck from earlier. Now that the people were being helped, it was my time to confront the kid directly. I took flight, shooting up several yards before dashing forward. The kid, who was telekinetically holding up a SWAT fan in several feet in front of him to act as a shield for the hailstorm of bullets coming his way, gritted his teeth as he raised his other hand. A police squad car to his left suddenly began to levitate a few feet off the ground, and his intentions with it were more than clear. "All I want is Frank. Give him to me, and I won't hurt anyone else," he shouted towards the police officers still pelting him with bullets. The squad car then began to levitate higher, and he was preparing to bring it down on the officers. That is, before I flew down and landed hard enough to throw the kid off his feet and send him soaring several feet backwards, before slamming into a police sedan's passenger door. A spiral of cracks formed in the asphalt beneath my feet. The SWAT van and squad car had then fallen, slamming onto the road since the kid had seemingly lost his concentration. A small stream of blood then began to seep out of the kid's forehead and run down to the side of his face, narrowly missing his lips. "That's enough," I exploded at him like a furious father reprimanding his son. "Look around you. See all this? You did this, and I'm bringing you in." The kid didn't respond. Instead, he simply gritted his teeth and raised a hand for what was obviously an attack. But before he could start moving any objects, I closed the distance between him and I in milliseconds and tapped him on the head with an open palm to knock him unconscious. I ensured that I slowed down the speed of my arm at the last instant, as well as carefully applying just enough force to do so instead of, for example, smacking his head clean off his shoulders, as it appeared increased durability was not one of his powers. I also listened for his heartbeat just to make sure everything was alright. I then regrouped with Vora, Cryofreeze, and Linda to thank them for helping out, as well as ask Vora if she'd be able to transport the kid to one of the Superhuman holding cells at headquarters while we await to get more information on him. "Sounds easy enough to me. Glad to work with you again, Vic." She nodded before lifting up the kid's unconscious body and sinking into the floor, both of them vanishing. "Any more deaths that we know of?" I inquired with Cryofreeze and Linda, both standing in front of me. "Not more than one officer, no. Several minor injuries and somewhere around $4 million in damages, but overall it could have been a lot worse," Cryofreeze replied. "Sure, but a family is still getting told that someone they loved died today," I said, sighing as my eyes looked to the ground. I then paused before looking back up at both of them and sighing. "I'm sorry," I followed up. "Didn't mean to sound like a jerk about it." "It's okay, don't be sorry. You're right. Someone's gonna have their world shattered," Linda added. "Think I'll be staying behind to help with the cleanup. Any chance I could see you soon, Victor? Maybe we could grab dinner or drinks together?" she inquired, her signature smile beginning to re-emerge. "I'd like that," I replied, before darting my glance to the left after she had made eye contact. "I could use a cold soda. Regardless though, nice seeing you again, Victor," Cryofreeze interjected, holding out his right hand. I took it, shaking it before giving him a smile. "You too. You did great work today, and I appreciate the help. Feel free to give me a call if you ever need the favor returned," I announced. After this, I stayed behind long enough with Linda to ensure that the bridge was both stable and that all the wounded had been attended to. I looked for any more potential bodies that had been missed and helped clean up large chunks of rubble. I spoke with some first responders as well, giving them as much information as possible while they picked up and tended to the remaining wounded. After that was all taken care of, I ascended a few yards into the air, took one last long look at the destruction on the bridge, and then flew off, shooting up into the sky and taking off toward headquarters. Once I arrived, I did end up meeting with the First Lady, who by all accounts was understanding of my delay. "You were out there saving lives. That's not something you should over-apologize for," she posited while shaking my hand. "It's not something anyone should be apologizing for." She then shot an irritated glance toward my director Mike, who looked off to the side nervously. The rest of the meeting didn't really concern me as much as it did Mike and the other administrative staff at headquarters, so I had left the room. Technically, I was off duty for the rest of the day and even changed out of my suit and back into my civilian clothing of choice: jeans, a black t-shirt, and some sneakers. Couldn't go wrong with simplicity. I planned to head back home to my apartment that night and have a movie night with my brother Sean, who himself was an EMT. I figure I'd pick up some takeout on the way home for the both of us. I even gave him a call as I walked through the halls of the headquarters building, figuring I'd have him tell me exactly what he wants. Luckily, he picked up on the second ring. "Sup, old man? You done for the day?" he asked, excitement present. "Yeah, just got changed, and I'm leaving. You hungry? I was gonna grab something on the way home." "Yeah, actually. I had to skip lunch today and take a call. Someone got stabbed at the downtown library. Supposedly it was over a couple overdue books. Some people, am I right? But hey, I'm sure it's nothing compared to what you've had going on." I sighed. Had to fight a kid today. Looked just barely old enough to have his driver's license. "Wait a minute. Was that what I saw on the news earlier? About some superpowered teenager wreaking havoc on the Williamsburg Bridge? Pretty sure they were almost gonna send me over there until we got another call." "Sure was. He's in custody at the moment. On the bridge, he said he was looking for someone named Frank. No clue who he's talking about, but apparently he thought luring out the entire police force would eventually let him get his hands on him," I replied, holding the phone closer to my ear. "Oh Jesus, that's insane," Sean responded. "Do you have any idea why he wants to find him? You think it was some guy that hurt him? Owes him money? Something like that? Sorry, am I being nosy? I'll just find the shit that happens at your job beyond entertaining." "I'm not completely sure. Maybe I'll dig into it tomorrow when I come back to work," I stated. Good plan. Hey, I'm gonna start looking for some movies while you're on your way home with the food. Anything you have in mind? Gotta say, a horror movie night might be fun. Anything related to people going missing or stuck in the woods sounds good to me. I chuckled. Awesome. I'll see what I can find then. I'll see you at home, big brother. See you there. The both of us then hung up, and I finished walking through the halls of the headquarters, passing by the weapons development wing. All sorts of various guns, explosives, and even prototype sonic weapons being worked on. Then there were the administrative offices. The assistant director Pamela was inside one of them, a stack of papers next to her as she typed away endlessly on the keyboard hooked up to her monitor. Her screen displayed a jumbled mess of digital files and reports. Her door was open, so I took a quick detour and knocked on the door frame, slightly leaning inside her office. Hey Victor, how's it going? Heading out for the day? She asked, not turning away from her computer. I am, yeah. What about you? It's almost 6:30. You're usually done at 6, aren't you? I've got a bunch of stuff to finish. Gonna stay back for a bit tonight. Plus, that meeting that Mike is in with the First Lady means I get to take on his work too. She grumbled. Yeah, that's Mike for you. Sorry to hear about all that. Is your family doing alright? I asked, to which she spun around in her chair, adjusting her glasses. They're great. We've got a trip planned for next month, so I'm pretty excited about that. These last few years since we brought you on have been crazy. There's been a major spike in superhuman attacks and disappearances. Trying to see if I can get to the bottom of it. Anything you might know that might be causing them? I inquired, genuinely curious. Not directly, but as far as some correlation goes, all of them have been between 14 and 17 years old. The kid you subdued today was the first one we actually have in custody. I try to find out if he has any family to contact, and letting them know that he's in custody, but I can't find anyone. Parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or cousins? It's sad, honestly. Couldn't even find his first name. That's really weird, I replied. Do you think I'd be able to visit his containment cell? I want to see if I could get some more information from him. Sure thing. Just submit an interview request when you get to work tomorrow, and I'll approve it from my laptop at home before I come in. Gotta say, I'm as curious as you about this young man. Thanks, Pamela. I appreciate it. Have a nice night and try not to stay too late, okay? I'll try not to, she chuckled. See you tomorrow. I'll be in a couple hours after you, I believe. Sounds good. I nodded before then leaving her office, finishing my trip to the headquarters exit, and then flying home, making sure to stop and grab something to eat for Sean and I on the way. That night, things had gone seemingly normal. I had come home, Sean and I watched our movie while he told me about some of the crazier calls he had taken during the day, the gruesome injuries he had seen, and some of the circumstances that led to some of those injuries in the first place. After which, we did some chores around the apartment and headed to bed. I fell asleep as I always did. Not that I needed to sleep nearly as much as the average person. In fact, it had been about 3 days since I last slept, but I only felt mildly tired. But extra rest never hurt. Typically when I do sleep, I sleep through the night. But long before I had my powers, and I was just a kid, I had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night. A lot. Not sure why or what caused it, but I eventually grew out of it in my mid-teens. However, on this particular night, for whatever reason, I had awoken in my bedroom. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, a couple hours was enough for me at this point to be fully rested. I checked the time on my phone, and it was just midnight. My TV was left on. I was a big fan of having it playing for the sake of slight background noise. A news broadcast had been playing with a female reporter facing the camera, a disturbed look on her face. This now marks the 10th report in the last few years regarding several superhuman orphaned young adults and teenagers going missing in the greater Manhattan area. Federal and local law enforcement urges that if you have any information as to the whereabouts of these young missing individuals, to please call the number listed to get in touch with your local branch of the Department of Superhuman Investigation to file a report. I groaned, my voice groggy and hoarse. The kid from the bridge didn't have any records of former parents or guardians and honestly appeared homeless from the way his clothes and hygiene were in disrepair. Maybe it was an odd coincidence, maybe not. All I knew for sure is that it was definitely some odd timing. I then turned over, now facing the window to my room, a window that looked out amongst the other downtown buildings, and immediately I was met with a sight that made me sit up in bed. On the roof of the building across the street from our apartment complex was what seemed to be a woman with silver hair perched atop it like a gargoyle. She was likely enhanced, given the fact that her skin was slightly glowing a bright orange hue. She also wore a large pair of black goggles, obscuring her eyes. She was staring directly at me through those goggles. I knew it. I sprung out of bed in my pajama pants and t-shirt, now standing on my bedroom floor. She continued to stare, her expression unchanging. I debated whether or not I should open the window, fly out and confront her. I was nearing the conclusion that using my powers wouldn't matter much due to the fact it was likely she already knew I was rubble, given the circumstances. My suit didn't come with a mask, never been a fan of the concept, but my private details, such as my address, phone number and email were supposed to be classified and kept a secret. So whoever this was, she had some sort of connections or resources to be able to find that info. My biggest concern was the fact that my brother was in this apartment, and unlike me, he didn't possess any superpowers of his own, making him far more vulnerable, and I couldn't take that chance. So I did what I thought at the time was best. I used my super speed to open up my window, fly out at just below the speed of sound to avoid a sonic boom, and only stop once I was now across the street and several feet both behind and above her, hovering there with my arms crossed. I'm gonna give you one chance to be as honest as possible. Who the hell are you? And why are you spying on me? I announced, deadpanned, doing my best to sound intimidating. Truth be told, I never considered myself to be very imposing. Might seem contradictory, given my abilities and all, but there were regular guys without powers that looked much more like powerhouses than myself. Hell, I sometimes flinch when someone points a gun at me. Guess there's just certain instincts you never truly lose, even with superpowers. Regardless, the woman turned around, caught off guard by my sudden shift in positioning. But nonetheless, we locked eyes. Her attire resembled a sort of dark green tracksuit, minus any sleeves, and tattooed on her left arm was a tree. "Release the boy," she hissed, "or there will be consequences." "Come again?" I asked, before quickly realizing who she was talking about. "The boy from the bridge. Tell your people to release him, or we will free him ourselves. And trust me when I say, you do not want those casualties on your hands. Do you, Victor?" Came her rebut. "Tell me who the hell you are, now," I demanded, uncrossing my arms and forming my hands into fists. "You and your officials will have 48 hours to release the boy, or we will take action on not only your colleagues, but your brother as well. Even you won't be fast enough to save him." I felt the blood everywhere in my body boil. I gritted my teeth and dashed down toward her at super speed, intending to grab her by the throat. And seemingly, I did. I had my hand wrapped around it, as I hovered there once again just above the roof of the building with her in my grasp. "Threaten my brother's life again, and you'll see just how fast I can make sure you end up at the bottom of the ocean. Now who the hell are you?" I erupted. But the woman didn't respond. Instead, she smiled. I'll admit, it took me aback. She didn't seem bothered by my hand being wrapped around her throat at all. But I wasn't deterred, up until the point where her body started to twitch, and she appeared to be. Transparent was the only word I could think of. I could see through and past her, like looking at a human-shaped structure of glass. "The hell?" I cursed under my breath, before she was seemingly solid again, only to then flash to a transparent state once more, as if there was a light bulb being flickered on and off. 1 second I could see through her, the next I couldn't. "What are you doing?" I tried to ask before she then disappeared entirely, vanishing without a trace, and there was nothing in my hand except air. I hovered there in the air, confused at what I had just witnessed. Perhaps she had the ability to teleport, but that wouldn't explain the changes in her transparency over and over. But after concluding that didn't make much sense, I chose the next best option. It was a hologram. She was never truly here in the first place, hence her lack of any apprehension when I confronted her physically. Before I even thought about going back to bed, I then flew around the entire city block and checked over all the building exteriors within them to ensure no one else was watching me. It gave me peace of mind, especially when my brother was in there sleeping. I checked pretty much the entire block in a few seconds. This may sound a bit odd, but I won't lie when I say that when I was first told I'd be getting super speed as part of my power set, I was not looking forward to it. Because typically, super speed also means super fast perception, and doing something as simple as having a conversation with a regular person would feel like hours from the speedster's perspective. Luckily though, my perception is adaptable, and what I mean by that is, I perceive things as fast as I need to based on my movement speed. If I'm strolling down the street, I see things just like everyone else. If I'm flying at a giant monster to punch him at hypersonic speeds, then yes, things will slow down from my point of view and my perception will adjust to my movement speed as needed. Not sure how the hell the scientists managed to pull that one off, but I'll take it. Anyway, I found no other signs of anyone else, so I hesitantly flew back to my apartment and stayed up for the remainder of the night, catching up on my favorite TV shows, while also keeping an eye on the window, of course. You might think with the abilities I've been given that it's strange for me to be wary of something like stranger danger, but you gotta remember that I spent the first 25 years of my life as just a regular person, able to be cut, stabbed, and shot. Sean had awoken before the sun had risen to go to work. I started getting ready myself as well. He already had most of his uniform on when I walked out into the living room to tell him about what transpired the previous night. The look on his face was one of shock. His eyebrows were kept raised throughout the entire time I told him the story. "Be careful," I punctuated. "Please. You should have woken me up last night. I wouldn't have been mad. But yeah, that's creepy as hell. What do you think you're gonna do?" he asked, taking his cell phone off the charging stand. "No clue, but I'll bring it up when I fly over to headquarters today. Hopefully they'll have some input. I'm gonna talk to the kid to see what he might know. I still hate the fact that I had to fight him," I added, looking at the floor, prompting Sean to put a hand on my shoulder. "Trust me, you showed that kid a hell of a lot more mercy than someone in his position would usually get. You think most people who endanger dozens of civilians, kill a cop, and cause that much chaos would get to live in the first place? He was an active and ongoing threat, and he's lucky you showed up before a cop got lucky and put a bullet in his chest. He is just a kid, yes, but he made a terrible decision, and he's gonna have to live with it. Maybe he'll get worse, maybe he'll get better, but no matter what, he has a chance to reflect and change because of you. Don't ever forget that." "Thanks, man," I said, unable to help the smirk that emerged on my face. Sean and I then went in to hug one another briefly before pulling away. Sean then took out his cell phone. The screen had awoken and he glanced at it quickly before looking back at me. "Hey, don't mention it. I've gotta get going though. Boss man's gonna flip if I'm late. We've got a student doing a ride-along today with us for his courses. Wants to become an EMT. "That's awesome," I smiled. "He'll have a good teacher. I'll see you this evening then," I said, turning back to switch off the light to my bedroom. "Sounds good. I'll be home a bit earlier today too. Wanted to use some of my PTO time to take a half day and come home after I finish giving the kid a ride-along." Sean punctuated before the sound of the apartment door could be heard being closed and locked. I walked to the kitchen to grab a bite to eat before heading out as well. Looking at the time on the oven's clock, 5:43 a.m. When I arrived at work that morning and swiped my keycard for building access, I went and submitted the interview request for Pamela to approve, which she did within 6 minutes of me sending it in from my computer. For me to conduct an interview with the kid, I would need a witness, just for potential liability reasons. Guess I hadn't thought things through when I realized that Mike would be out on paid time off for the next week, and therefore wouldn't be available. Pamela's actual shift didn't start for another hour, and she simply approved my interview request from home on her work laptop. Plus, I needed to inform her of what happened last night when she got into work, as what that woman had said was technically a threat to DSI personnel and property. So, I needed something to do in the meantime. The crime radar said that there wasn't anything going on for the time being, so not much on that front. So I figured I'd go make sure the perimeter of the building was secure with all things considered. I went to my locker and put on my suit as well. When I went out into the main hall of the headquarters, I ran into Gary, one of our first shift morning custodians. He was relatively new, only having been here a month. He actually just completed his training a couple weeks ago and seemed to be doing well. When I encountered him in the hallway, he was sorting sanitation supplies on his cleaning cart, appearing to stumble and nearly drop something upon seeing me. He looked over, before rummaging around with a few more spray bottles and a mop handle. "Hey Victor, good morning." He nodded, still looking at his cart. "Hey Gary, how's it going?" I asked. "Oh, you know, just a bit tired. My newborn kept me and my wife up for most of the night. He got pretty fussy," he went on. "Oh geez, were you able to get him back to sleep?" "Yeah, about 2 hours before I had to be up for work," he chuckled. "Stopped and made sure I got the strongest coffee possible this morning." "I don't blame you," I added. "Hopefully you get some more sleep tonight." "Me too," he punctuated. "But hey, the coffee should kick in soon." "Let's hope," I chuckled. I turned to keep walking toward the exit, only for Gary to put a hand on my shoulder. I stopped myself, turning around and facing him. "I actually had a question for you, if you don't mind," he inquired. "Sure thing, what's up?" "Do you usually work morning shifts? That's when I see you here the most. Just curious." "I typically work whenever I'm needed, but the majority of the time, I'm here at the ass crack of dawn. So to actually answer the question, yes." "Okay, thanks," Gary replied quickly, before then turning around and going back to his cleaning cart. I turned around myself to keep walking, as I heard him grab and quickly type something on his cell phone. I made it outside with the first shift security team. While they covered the ground, I did a fly over the property, having myself positioned 100 feet above as I scanned it, looking for any signs of our walls being compromised or any strange vehicles. Again, not finding anything out of the ordinary. Sure, that creepy lady said it would be 48 hours before they tried anything, but I'm not exactly gonna take her word for it. Better to be safe than sorry. I did an extra lap around the property as well, and flew a bit closer to the ground in case I was missing something from the height I was previously at. Still nothing. I regrouped with the security officers who said they'd keep an eye out. By the time we had finished up with the perimeter check, Pamela's shift had begun. I heard her car pulling up into the lot and her entering the building after she scanned her keycard. I flew back to the entrance and descended down in front of the main doors, scanning my keycard and going in after her. The sound of the door shutting seemed to startle her. She turned around and began to reach for her pistol, only to see me standing there and relax her expression and posture. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make you jump," I asserted. "Good morning, by the way." "Morning, Victor. And it's not your fault, I'm just a bit jumpy," she huffed with relief, repositioning her glasses. "Wait a minute," I began, raising an eyebrow. "Why are you jumpy? I've never known you as easy to scare." Pamela then looked at the floor before letting out a sigh. "Someone was in my driveway last night when I pulled into my house. A woman I didn't recognize. I think it was anyway. Doesn't sound horrible, I know, but I live in a goddamn gated community." "Did she have goggles on?" I interrupted. "Green tracksuit, a tattoo of a tree on her arm, turned out to be a hologram?" My question prompted Pamela to raise her eyebrow. "Huh? How do you know?" "She paid me a visit last night as well, was watching me through my apartment window, and threatened my brother's life too." "Oh Jesus, did she tell you to release the kid too?" Pamela began. "Yeah, she did. I'm assuming you also heard what's gonna happen if we don't?" "I did. I already made a call to the rest of the security team and told them to come in for overtime. We're gonna need to beef things up around here if there's even a slim chance that what she said is true. I'm gonna call in some extra heroes too and have this place fortified to all hell. We're not taking any chances. I'll make the calls to Linda and Droven as well, I replied. Good idea, but you'll have to switch out Droven for someone else. He's off planet for the next couple weeks. Regardless, if they feel confident attacking this place knowing you're here, they must have either some serious firepower or crazy tricks up their sleeves. Pamela sighed, pausing her sentence and looking over to the right. I also did approve your interview request, she added. And now that I'm here, we can do it together. Maybe the kid will have some answers as to what might be coming for us. Let's hope, I punctuated. Pamela got all of her stuff sorted in her office, and we set out to the containment and holding cell wing to speak to the kid. A good question that many may ask is how we manage to successfully contain superhumans, specifically the kid who can move and manipulate any non-sentient objects according to his abilities analysis report. Well, each superhuman's cell is tailored to counteract a specific power set. For example, if we have someone who can manipulate and produce fire at will, more commonly a pyromancer, then their cell will be contained in a large tank that is surrounded by water on the outside. So if they melt down the walls, then their cell will be immediately flooded. The kid's cell was lined with what are called anti-neuron frequency wave generators. I have zero clue about the details of how it works. Never been a scientist of any kind. But a general understanding I have after receiving an explanation from Pamela is that the wiring on the walls of the kid's cells emit an energy that blocks out the frequency the kid utilizes in order to manipulate the objects around him. Therefore, his telekinesis wasn't usable when he was inside. Pamela and I had arrived at his cell, and after greeting the guard looking over the wing, she scanned her keycard and punched in a passcode of some sort to get inside. And the door slid open after a robotic female voice had told us, "Access granted.